I don't think my atoms are real jazzed up about being in the wrong dimension. Here's your look at the Hasbro Marvel Legends Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse, Peter B. Parker. Peter Parker mentors Miles Morales, an all-new Spider-Man, to understand the importance of power and responsibility. Continuing with our looks at the Marvel Legends Stiltman wave, the next figure we're going to be having a look at is Peter B. Parker. And of course, before we get a closer look at the figure, we're going to first figure out how tall Peter Parker stands. Taking the tape measure to the very top of his head, reading it aloud to you, the viewing audience, you're looking at the figure standing 6.5 or 6.5 inches in height. We can switch that to centimeters, revealing that Peter B. Parker stands 16.5 or 16.5 centimeters tall. Here comes your size comparisons. We can bring in Miles Morales, figure we just recently had a look at. So yeah, still difficulty when it comes to getting him to properly stand. It has something to do more so with his feet. Let's get his feet to be firmly, there we go. We also just recently had a look at the Prowler. Prowler's roughly about the same height, you could say, as Peter Parker. Peter Parker's maybe just a little bit taller. And we'll also bring in Frogman, just because I'm looking for any reason, any excuse whatsoever to actually bring in Frogman. Great looking lineup of figures. I feel like Frogman's going to be falling over any time. So getting a good closer look at how Peter Parker stacks up with some of the other figures released under the Stiltman wave. And just because he hasn't had enough love, there's a Spider-Ham as well. Love Spider-Ham. For the accessories, Peter Parker comes included with some swappable hands, comes with a swappable head, comes with a beverage of choice, and he also comes included with a head for Stiltman. Now, we are continuing our trend of building our Stiltman until finally we have everything finished, resolved, calling it a day, packing up shop. Some of you may have only just been picking up Peter Parker and just the select figures, maybe from Into the Spiderverse, with no intended plan whatsoever of actually putting together Stiltman. I am rather the opposite to that. I was excited by the idea of actually building Stiltman because I actually have some issue comics from my childhood that feature Stiltman in there. It's rather obscure to have comics with Stiltman in it. Nonetheless, though, for the included part of Stiltman to come include with Peter Parker, you get yourself the head sculpt. Bit of a smirk on his face, you would say. The coloring is the same as all the other pieces that we've looked at so far. This real nice metallic plastic, and it seems like this is the coloring of the plastic, not necessarily the paint job. You can also see, again, like with all the other pieces that we've had a look at, there's like a little bit of marbling almost into the plastic itself. This is a really good looking head sculpt. Be mindful, of course, of these little side antennas. You don't want to break those. Now we can reach off to the side where the black hole currently has been babysitting the rest of my Stiltman. This is basically where we've left off so far. We're making progress. Slowly. We still, of course, have to build the very long legs to him. But after that, we're going to have ourselves a finished, completed, and rather snazzy-looking Stiltman. Now, the concern I had when I was putting this backpack in place was whether I actually should have left it off or if I should have actually put it on and then put the head sculpt on. I think I'm going to stick with the idea of keeping the backpack on because while I'm looking at the head sculpt here of Stiltman, I feel as if I had put the head sculpt down first, yeah, obviously it would have been probably a little bit more difficult. Maybe it would have been. Maybe it wouldn't have been. I feel it would have been a little more difficult to get that backpack in place once you've already got the head sculpt on there. So I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to throw caution to the wind, and I'm going to try my best to get the head sculpt in place. One difficulty I already see happening is there really isn't enough wiggle space to get in there. Maybe I will have to actually remove. You know what? Let's remove the backpack. I'm going to try it the opposite way. I thought I actually was helping myself along, but maybe I was making things more difficult than they needed to be. Get the head sculpt on there. Oh, it's so super tight. I might actually have to heat this up, I think, to get it in place. The biggest thing is I really don't want to apply too much pressure for the risk that I bend or break the antennas on either side of Stiltman's head. That would really suck. Let's see if we can actually get this on. It doesn't help either that the plastic is super slippery. Oh, I'm going to have to, you know what? I'm going to have to do this off camera. Leave it with me. Leave it with me. I know we're not making much progress in the meantime. We're going to put that to the side for the time being. Leave it with me. I probably shouldn't have put so much moisturizer on these hands of mine before shooting these reviews, because I find like just holding onto Stiltman's hands and the rest of his body is just difficult. Anyways, having a look at the rest of the accessories that come included with Peter Parker, he comes with a beverage, a little sipping cup with a straw, a nice bent straw, I might also say. It looks like it's all molded in white plastic with, as you can see, the band on the top there done in yellow and blue. A nice little beverage. It does fit very nicely into his hand. The downside, though, is you can only use it with Peter Parker's hands. Well, what I mean by that is the other hands that we're going to be looking at specifically with the Spider-Man outfit, so like the Spider-Man gloved hands, aren't really accommodating holding that beverage. You only get two Spider-Man shooting web hands. Of course, you get two gripping hands. So really the only way for him to hold said beverage is to keep the human hands or flesh-colored hands still intact onto the figure's arms. To come also included with the figure, he gets an alternate head sculpt. The interesting thing about the head sculpt, as you can see when you look at the two side to side, is the fact that the one that has the actual mask lifted up doesn't have any stubble. Whereas the one that does have no mask, sans la mask, actually has stubble. I have seen some instances where people have posted pictures online of finding Peter Parker in the wild where he didn't actually have stubble painted to his face. And I don't know if it's just a case of reissuing the figure or it could have been just factory defects. But there are some Spider-Man Peter Parkers lurking out there that actually don't have stubble on their face. I prefer the stubble personally on Peter, but there are some out there apparently in the wild that have more closer to like this head sculpt, with of course minus the stubble, than this one right here. To swap out the heads, even though this is really going to be my favorite of the two head sculpts, just going to go ahead and pop that off and just replace the head sculpt like so. It really is difficult when you are getting these heads in place because the ball joints, these socket joints, always are known to swivel back and forth when you really don't want them to be. The one time I want no articulation on the figure is when I'm actually getting the head in place. There we go. I guess while we're also at it, we can go ahead and pop the hands out as well. Moisturizer was such a bad idea. Sometimes we have good ideas that sound good on paper at the time, and other times when you realize later, yeah, moisturizer, probably shouldn't have used moisturizer. Go ahead and pop the hands back into place. Whoa, making sure the thumbs are going the right way. Thumbsies go in. That's simple kindergarten logic. He does have a couple of fist hands, for example. I've already taken the liberty of already putting one in. And then he also comes with some web shooting hands as well. Can't help but notice that finger is slightly bent. Slightly bent. But again, if you want to just pop these off, this hand's a little harder because there's less hand to hold on to. You know what, we'll just leave it for the time being. Realizing the error of my ways, I shouldn't have used so much more moisturizer on my hands. Anyways, that's what he looks like basically with the swappable hand options. Personally, when it comes to displaying the figure for myself, I really like the route of going with the unmasked portrait myself, just because I think it's a much better looking head sculpt. So perhaps what we will do is fly around the Earth, rotating the Earth and of course adjusting the time stream. We're going to go ahead and pop the hands back into place, starting off where we left off, and we're going to go ahead and pop the head sculpt back off, replacing with this head sculpt once again. Going to rectify all the events. Lois will be saved, and everything will be fine and good until we decide to spin the Earth again in the sequel. So we get a closer look now at Spider-Man, of course, Peter Parker without the unmasked portrait. There it is, the two differences side to side. Yeah, again, I really like this one a lot more. You can see the sculpting of the hair is actually really quite good on this. One unfortunate result of putting the articulation where they did is his Adam's apple ends up being traded off to a big giant swivel. It's unfortunate because it kind of looks like he had had surgery done to his neck. But it's unavoidable simply just because of the way that the figure has to be put together to give you the much needed articulation that you so desire. The trade-off, unfortunately, is, yes, he's got one big giant swivel sticking out on his Adam's apple. I guess one good thing is at least his chin is low enough that it hides a little bit of it. Not a lot of it, but at least just a little bit of it. The coloring is quite good on this. The head sculpt is accurate to the way he looks in the film, complete again with that stubble, which I do so appreciate. I think the paint on the eyes is also really quite good as well. Not only just the eyes themselves, but the shadowing they've done right around the top area of the eyes, between the eyes and the eyebrows. These giant caterpillars across his forehead. Really, really nice work there on the head sculpt. Of course, when it goes to the rest of his body, he's wearing his larger bomber jacket. And underneath there is this Spider-Man costume. Now, of course, you can get the full effect by doing what I had done earlier by just popping the hands out, swapping them out with the Spider-Man hands if you want to continue the trend of having the same look as the outfit underneath. Again, I personally prefer to go with the more human-looking hands. That's just my own personal preference. Detailing on the jacket is really nice. Doesn't look like they did use a lot of paints. Again, relying only on the mold of the plastic. It's effective and it keeps things generally clean, as opposed to having to go in there and paint these all by hand. There are a few little areas, like for example the joints on the backs of the elbows, that aren't quite jiving the same color as the rest of the sleeve. I'm not really sure why they went the choice of going with a more gray-based green, but it does stand out a little bit. But you could maybe just justify that there's elbow patches on the jacket that are a slight different color than the rest of the jacket. Yeah, we'll go ahead and run with that. Buttons, as you can see, are painted nicely in gold, as well as some side buttons are also snapped in place with some additional gold. That looks nice. And as for the lower half of him, he's basically wearing like jogging pants. Not long enough to, of course, cover down to his ankles, but giving you some nice detailing done to the legs. Very lanky looking legs. As you can see down at the bottom of that, he's also got himself two different shoes. One a smaller, well, one is a larger kind of boot, and the smaller one is more closer to being a sneaker. Again, you've got hinge joints on the bottoms of those feet, which we'll talk about in a second. Actually, the hinge joint is right here at the very top of the lace on the boots. So he has some nice articulation there. Unlike Miles Morales, I find Peter Parker stands a little bit better when you put him just straight down. Might also help for the fact he's got larger feet, but if you do have some difficulty with your figure standing, by all means, make use of the display stand for those supplied peg holes on the undersides of Peter Parker's feet. Let's run through the articulation now for Peter B. Parker. His head rotates all the way around. Again, love that head sculpt. Look at the hair on that. My hair's getting long like that. I really do have to get myself a haircut. I'm right now in kind of mid-COVID haircut. You know, that haircut time where you really need to get yourself a haircut. You're beyond the point of actually being able to manage it with hair product. Definitely going to have to get myself a haircut. It's really a lot longer than this right now. But the head rotates all the way around with a very noticeable hinge joint there for the neck. Moves up and down. And you can also rock it back and forth as well. He does have an upper torso ball joint, although it's a little bit hindered by the fact he does have the jacket going over top of it. You can rotate the top of the torso back and forth, up and down, and you can also rock it back and forth as well. For his lower half, he does have also a lower torso ball joint. So fancy that. Ball joint at the top, ball joint at the bottom, equaling a pretty posable looking Peter. The arms hinge out at a full, comfortable 90-degree angle bend. You can bring the arms down and all the way around as well. Swivel at the bicep, double hinge on the elbow, although I can't quite pull off a full bend on the elbow. This joint is a little on the tight side. I'm going to have to maybe see if I can get a hairdryer. Heat that up, soften that up a little bit to get that joint to bend a little bit better. Hands rotate all the way around and also hinge back and forth. For his leg articulation, they split out. You can go forward and back on the legs. A swivel 3/4 of the way up the thigh. He has a double hinge on the knee. There's one, there's two. There's a second one there as well, but again, a little tighter on the figure for me. And then he also has articulation in the foot, back and forth, and you can also rock it back and forth this way as well. One thing I do like about the Peter Parker is he stacks very well with Miles Morales. Again, reaching off to the side, we'll bring back in Miles Morales. I think they're the appropriate size they should be based on the way they look in the film. Peter Parker is a lot taller, as you can see. And I think that translates also very well to the figures. Just wish Miles Morales could stand just a little bit better. We are also a little bit closer to finishing off Stiltman, which has me rather excited. Strange that I would be so excited for Stiltman, and yet I had so many comics as a kid with Stiltman in it. Strange that I would just have a collection with Stiltman stuff in it. But I am very much looking forward to getting Stiltman fully put together. That will, of course, involve with a little bit of TLC to finally get the head in place. But we are making progress with one more figure left to go before completing him. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we ever got ourselves a Marvel Legends Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse fully costumed Spider-Man. We did, in fact, get ourselves a Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse fully dressed Spider-Man, part of the basic class figures that had a little bit more limited posability, which I actually did do a review of. Now, looking at this, I probably should have done myself a bit of a service and brought that figure out so I can actually have done comparisons in sizes. But I think the other one was a little bit bigger versus this one right here. Of course, me asking this would have increased the quantity of figures in the Stiltman wave from the 6 to, again, an odd 7. And if you think maybe perhaps we already have too many Spider-Mans as it is, we didn't really need to get ourselves another Spider-Man. For Into the Spider-Verse, I would argue and say yes, it would have been nice that we also have gotten a Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man fully costumed version. Despite that, Peter Parker ends up being quite a standout figure in this wave. Both him and Miles Morales are very screen accurate. Certainly when it comes to the Marvel Legends version of Peter Parker, Hasbro does give you a swappable head sculpt, which currently you can see here in final looks won't be staying on the figure's shoulders. No way, no how. I'm going to be popping this off right after this review and putting back the full hair treatment Peter Parker, which my hair kind of looks like that right now, and probably the same amount of stubble. That's going to be the way I'm going to be displaying the figure, with drink in hand and bendy straw stuck in the cup. A really nice looking figure though. Of the ones that we've looked at so far, I like them for different reasons. Each one of them is kind of like my own children. I love them each for different reasons. That doesn't sound really good. But my favorite figures so far have been Miles Morales and probably Peter Parker, with a very, very close to that is Frogman, just because I like how outrageous Frogman is. Well done, though, on the look of Peter B. Parker, which again, if you are looking for this guy out in the wild, just be careful that there are a few that I've seen online that don't have the stubble. If you want a clean-shaven Peter Parker, that's fine and good, but I like the stubble on Peter, so I definitely would be looking for that one if you're in the market of picking these ones up and adding them to your collection. This now leaves one figure left, the Hand Ninja. I only left it really to the end because he involves using the stilts. He's the stilt guy that gives the legs to Stiltman. So, of course, we're going to be having a look at that figure last. And, of course, right after that, we're going to be having a look at Stiltman himself. I really hope he can actually stand on his own, because it doesn't really look like he's going to be able to stand. What do you guys think of this figure line? What is your favorite figure so far that we've had a look in the Marvel Legends series? Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse or the Stiltman wave? Like reading your comments down below. If you are new to this channel and you're liking all the content you're seeing, because we're doing a whole lot of content as of late, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. You can turn the bell notification on, and by all means, come back to this channel Monday to Friday, 12 p.m., 2 p.m. That's twice a day, Monday to Friday. Lots of videos, like I said, come your way. Keep your peepers peeled to this channel, and as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.